This week on Wild Chats, I'm chatting to a guy who decided that reading about epic survival stories wasn't enough. It wasn't enticing, it wasn't exciting enough. So he started reliving them himself. He did it alone, did it very hungry at times, did it pretty far from help most of the time. Mike Atkinson, or as we know you, Outback Mike, welcome to the show.
G'day, thanks for having me.
We've sort of looked at your journey. I've done a lot of research in the background because it fascinates me about, how you have gone out there and delivered yourself to your own inner Mike. You go and do things alone. You go and learn a lot. You teach people along the way through the power of YouTube and social media. Did you ever think, though, when you were doing this as a career, you were an RAF pilot, you were doing things that were bringing you a decent salary, you were doing things obviously around the country and around the world. What was that moment where you suddenly thought, I'm going to leave my perfectly good flying career and I'm going to go and try and make a living by going hungry in the Australian bush?
I'd already planned that as a teenager. So I watched Top Gun and I watched The Bush Tucker Man. You know The Bush Tucker Man?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was like, well, they're the two coolest things that I can think of. I would like to do both. So that's the piloting thing explained. But I always thought that I would leave that and then make stuff like The Bush Tucker Man. I didn't know what that would look like. YouTube hadn't been invented. Luckily, it has been invented because you get better content now on YouTube than you do on commercial television, I think, for a bunch of different reasons. But I'd always planned that. So it was like I was itching to, not finish the piloting stuff because that actually gave me a chance to learn survival and instruct survival as well. But yeah, I always planned to.
And obviously, the journey from there to today has been, you've had massive ups, you've had massive downs with it. You've been, alone by yourself. You've been alone in front of, millions of people. The story of survival and outback existence goes back to tens of thousands of years prior to YouTube, prior to White Man, prior to every one of these. And I think part of your journey has been actually going back to the First Nations people, the Aboriginal people in the very north of Australia, and learning skill sets and assets from them. I mean, that's such an important part of Australia's story.
Oh, yeah, it is. And it used to be, my fascination was with the bush tucker. And then as I've researched it more, I've realized that there's actually a whole bunch of other really important, more important stuff about how to enjoy life, how to live sustainably, and how to create a society where sustainable living is entrenched in all different hierarchies of a civilization. It's not in all we've got is laws to protect things, and it doesn't really work. But it's in there. It's built in their religion and a whole things like that. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there which it's just fascinating. Yeah.
When did you first decide you were going to sort of take yourself remote out bush? Where was your destinations? Where were you heading to go and get those learnings from the elders?
Oh, okay. Aboriginally speaking, so I had some exposure. My dad built a fishing lodge on a remote island north of Darwin called Bathurst Island. So at age 11, I had, some experience there, going to the communities there. Not a great deal, but once again, I kind of seen a little bit of that on the Bush Tucker Man. Then when I became a pilot, I started doing my own expeditions. In fact, I was posted to Darwin, so I had contacts there from that, and then they started giving me permission. So I started learning that stuff. But then very quickly, I found out about this unit up there called NORFORCE, stands for Northern Force, and it is basically a unit that was created back before World War II. They realised Aboriginal people are the gurus at patrolling Northern Australia. Will make a unit, see if Aboriginal people want to be involved. They were. That's their bread and butter. And so this unit instruct soldiers how to survive if they don't get resupply. So I just managed as a pilot to wangle my way onto this course as a participant, and then later an instructor, and that gave me lots of access to Aboriginal knowledge that had been accumulated within the unit, and then also more contacts outside of the military that I could then go and do my own expeditions with. So that was my first formal kind of introduction. And then it gave me the freedom, like when we do an exercise, we'd be flying around Australia or something in choppers, and I'd be like, right, we're going to Kimberley. Let's look up the Kimberley Squadron. And we'd go out on these amazing bush tucker journeys with Aboriginal people. They'd get turtles and a whole range of things. So it just gave me an excuse as a helicopter pilot to land in beautiful places and learn crazy stuff. And that's kind of what the Bush Tucker Man did. He was actually attached to the squadron that I flew in. And my
so that was his
commanding
grounding
officer,
as well, was a military background as well.
Well, yeah, he was a military major, and he was scientifically studying bush tucker, learning about the nutrients and giving it back to the army. But in order for him to do that, they attached him to my former helicopter squadron. So all my COs and commanding officers, they used to fly him around and they'd tell me all these stories. So in a way, I got to live out my little dream of landing in remote communities. No, it wasn't filmed, but who cares, man? I was there to learn from the Aboriginal people.
It was experience,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a big sort of, in a way, not disconnect, but it seems like the background was dad did these things and took these adventures, and that sowed the seed early on for you to maybe not follow that path straight away, but then to get some sort of inspiration for your journey in life and where it might go. Parents are so crucial and influential in those early days in the kids' lives.
I think it was probably my dad used to take me fishing a lot, whether that was trout fishing in the mountains or we'd go fishing offshore and deep sea fishing and stuff. So yes, and associated with that, our families used to camp a lot. My best mate across the road, we'd just always be going on camping adventures. So yes, I was lucky that I was exposed to that. And it just, to me, the coolest thing in the world was shooting a rabbit with a bow and arrow, or going fishing. Like that was just like, is there anything else worth doing? Like I wasn't into sports or toys or anything like that. So I was a bit of an outsider, but luckily I just had this best mate that I grew up with across the road, and we just did everything like that together. And so I missed normal society. I don't know, but my brain just isn't interested in what everybody else. Well, what the general population is interested in, I'm just not so much interested in.
You're driven by a different happy place, and I think that's perfectly normal. And I think that's it is an education that is so much more in line with happiness, quality of life. I feel the pressure almost every day trying to run a business that you're always trying to do so much. You're trying to satisfy so many people. You're trying to do these things, and yet when you take a step back and you go on these individual solo journeys and you assimilate with communities that are cut off from the Western world and technology, you find happiness is more inset. It's a lot easier to discover and be part of.
Yep. I mean, Captain Cook said Aboriginal people were happier than we Europeans. When I was traveling around India on a shoestring in Delhi, looking in the slums and stuff, there were more people with smiles on their faces than there is on the streets of Sydney.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So it sounds like you've got your friend across the street, you've got dad on the camping trips, and then as you grow and you go through your military career, you're then getting this touch point with these First Nation communities that really are teaching you the basics. It's the, what can I find if I'm out here by myself? Key people in those communities that you've kept in touch with, or were they just, passing ships in the night that you learned from?
No, I still keep in contact. And that is a thing that when I've been told this by Aboriginal people, that when they meet someone, they don't want a transactional one-off relationship, which functions well in our society. But if they don't like people turn up, hey, I want this, you get what you want and you bugger off and you never see them again. They want to they want to stay in contact, and they don't really want to waste their time in a relationship if it's just going to be a temporary one.
So they're there for. I mean, I haven't had many touch points with it. We went out to an area towards Mount Woodroff in South Australia when we were doing a bit of a project called the Aussie 8, and some of the elders there, they took 2 or 3 days to arrive, and they just wanted to sit and talk and laugh from the belly and chew the fat and learn, help you learn about the landscape. That was my very small touch point. You've obviously spent a lot more time up there in the north.
Yeah, definitely. And there's actually similarities there in the Middle East. Like, it's very rude to meet someone. If you're going to buy a camel, like I've done expeditions over there, it's pretty rude to turn up and start talking prices. You got to come into the tent, and in a way, traditional cultures, that they're assessing your trustworthiness, and they deeply want the relationship because that's important. We've got rid of that in our transactional society.
Yes.
So with a transaction, it's not just about a transaction. There's more to be gained, and so that's why these more traditional cultures operate differently.
You obviously fell in love with that sort of northern side of Australia as well. One of the early trips that you have done, or expeditions, I should say, it's not really a trip. It's was to retrace the German plain. Can you just sort of give us some insights into that? Because that, to me, I knew nothing about. I knew about the TV stuff. I knew about the Great Barrier Reef journey, but this to me was a new one that I've only just learnt about.
Sure. So the survival thing that actually happened was these 2 German aviators were, in 1932, they were flying from Europe to Australia to promote this seaplane, which was fairly recently created. So it was a promotional thing. They were taken off from Kupang in Indonesia, and they were going to Darwin. And at the last minute, they thought, okay, we're going to do it at night because it's a publicity stunt. It's the first time it's ever been done, or second time. Right. And they basically aimed off because they expected the wind to come from a certain direction. And I think, with my piloting experience, that basically there wasn't a crosswind. So they aimed off track, but because it was a night time and they couldn't see the chop on the waves, they couldn't assess the wind direction. They ended up off track, lost because they thought they were north of Darwin, actually south. And they basically spent 42 days trying different methods of escape. And that included taking a float off their seaplane and using it like a canoe, and included walkouts over. There's about 7 different attempts that they did, multiple canoe attempts and multiple overland attempts. They eventually gave up, and in his own words, he expected to die that night. And he woke up in the morning in this cave and he saw an Aboriginal guy spearing the fish. This Aboriginal person was on a search for him. And these guys, they were rescued by Aboriginal people. And there's another great story about how these Aboriginal people, ran and for hundreds of kilometres and swam across this trench. And so I ended up meeting the relatives of those Aboriginal people, and and heard the story firsthand, which is accurately retold because of the way that they retell accurately oral history stuff. Yeah, so that's what happened. So I put myself in that situation. It's actually the second time I did it. I did this as a kind of like a pilot episode for the ABC with a mate. And we didn't have enough time. There was a cyclone on its way. It ended up being a fail because we did get hit by a cyclone. The engine I was trying to use to get in there broke. And but anyway, so it was a second attempt. I was familiar with the Kimberley because I'd done other expeditions when I was living in Darwin. But yeah, I put myself in there. I welded up 44-gallon drums in Wyndham, which is the nearest town, which is many hundreds of kilometres away. I motored it around to the start point with just enough fuel to get there, and then turned it into a catamaran whilst living off the land and sea with the same materials they had. And then I sailed it along the coast, and then I left it, and then I walked out overland to where this historic mission was called Pago Mission, where they could have been rescued. That's abandoned now, so then I had to keep going. And then, so basically I turned that into I self-shot that. And so like I said, I've been pitching this idea as a TV series. And as I discovered in that process, I was being told, oh, well, you'd have to call up every day on a satellite phone, and the producers would have to tell you what to do next. I'm like, well, I thought this was supposed to be genuine survival we're talking about here. So I could already see that this, whilst, as I was doing it, I was like, the only way to really do this justice is to go by yourself and self-film it. Because as soon as you have a camera crew there on, and as soon as you have TV people involved that are pushing these stereotypical agendas about something they know nothing about, it's going to ruin everything. Mm-hmm. So I remember thinking, if I just devoted 10 years to self-teaching myself how to make this stuff, that would be a better result. So it wasn't because I chose to do that. It's because I wasn't good enough to get selected for TV. But then I just thought, after that didn't work and a few things, I thought, right, I'm just going to do it myself. And that's how I trained myself using YouTube videos, how to fly drones, all this kind of stuff. This was whilst I was in Saudi Arabia instructing pilots there after I left the Air Force. And that's why it was self-shot. But the self-shot thing is so much more. I remember thinking, for all my expeditions, I think, if there was no camera, is this a worthwhile expedition? If the answer is no, then I don't do it. Like, I've got to pick something that's like really worthwhile. So, for example, Top Gun, my favorite movie. Tom Cruise isn't a fighter pilot. So whilst it looks like he was a fighter pilot, he pretended to have this experience, but he's not a fighter pilot. He doesn't know what it's like, even though he makes it sound like he is one, but he's not. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to go through life making films about survival situations and not have the experience myself. What's the point of that? So I want to have the experience, and then, or maybe if I bring a camera along, I can tell the story. That'll help me fund it. But then more importantly, that'll help get messages across to save, like the conservation angle is fairly important as well. And also letting other people know about how awesome Aboriginal culture is, or other cultures. So it lets you do kick all those goals if you can make it financially viable. And that's the bit that I'm still working on.
Yeah, I think that's always the current theme with, so many people that we speak to is it's very, very hard to make money out of adventure, especially when they're sort of self-driven ones. You want to know about them, you want the world to know about them, but how, unless you're sort of diluting the value of what you do by bringing on these massive partners or production companies, it's very hard to keep that flow of cash going to make them happen. So you almost become sort of a loner on that old journey by yourself. It becomes easier as your name gets out there. And I suppose you've got to do these initial ice-breaking ones, these groundbreaking adventures, where you're doing it for your own soul more than anything, to then get the familiarity that is what runs through your veins from the get-go, and then people start to get interested. But then there's that fine line you talk about, the crossover between when it becomes about you or it becomes about them. And I think keep treading that fine line is that infinitely difficult journey to take as a solo adventurer.
And I think YouTube, though, has solved all that, because there are now many people that just go on hardcore adventures. They make YouTube because YouTube is kind of democratizes content creation, because it's not about who you know and how many coffees and dinners you had with your television executive. It's how good your material is, and the algorithm goes, well, your stuff's good or it's crap. And so you have to
Yeah.
learn as you go. So that's why it's far more engaging now. And that's why all the eyeballs are moving across to YouTube. And so I follow lots of people and they're just going on awesome solo adventures, filming it, putting it out there. And now they're making a lot of money, but you can tell it wasn't their goal for doing it. They just wanted the adventure. So I think it's a great thing. And that's why I'm going to go YouTube full time next year.
It's really interesting as well, seeing the evolution of people's storytelling. The Outback boys in Alaska, the dad and the son combination,
Yep.
the authenticity of the basic gear that they use to tell a story. It's 3 or 4 action cameras, whether it's GoPros or DJIs or whatever. They've got their standard gear. Other people, you see, they start off like that, but then they evolve. The drones come in, and then maybe more production, and then maybe a team comes in and films. I'm thinking about the guys that are on La Vagabond. They are amazing in the content they produce. Their journey's really, really good. Riley, and I forget her name, but they are amazing in what they've done. But everything they've done now is so finely polished, so beautifully produced. It's venturing into that world of TV production, and what they were doing in the early days, you're sort of losing the authenticity.
I reckon that Outdoor Boys guy has nailed it. Even though he's left, and that shows he's not in there for the money, but it stayed simple. You shouldn't aspire to be a television show. And I've got to keep telling myself that. I've got to keep unlearning that aspiration, because it's one that I had since I was a kid. YouTube is far better. Now I am fully aspired to that. When I get offers, I am getting offers for TV stuff. Once again, just because it's an offer doesn't mean it's going to go ahead. And now I'm like, you know what? I'd rather be doing what the Outdoor Boys channel is doing. He just goes on genuine things with his family. It's fairly simply edited, and it's really engaging.
Yeah. So you can throw content constantly. Do you think, so are you producing all your stuff, or are you finding someone to do it? Because the thing is, when you shoot to deliver. And that's the thing. Your cutaways, your B-roll, the things you need to shoot in person at the time to then tell a good story at the end,
Well, I think you got to stop yourself there. Yeah. I think this is what I learned from Alone Australia. Okay.
Yeah.
That is what I did. And you, in a way, you're thinking about how this story is going to come together. And you can't, of course, you should do that to some extent. But so this guy, Tim Noonan, who's had a couple of Netflix series where he shot himself doing initiation ceremonies around the world. And the next one, when he got married to his wife, he did these marriage ceremonies around the world. And he was like, what you got to do, Mike, is not plan, not do those things. Just turn the camera on, figure out the problem as you're actually going through it, rather than having too many plans in place. So it's a constant, don't think, turn the camera on, think, and then think. So it's a much more authentic way of doing it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And that's, now that I've seen that, I reckon he was 100% right. That's what I'm doing, and it's working, because it really is working for me on Instagram and stuff like that at the moment. It's going up really quick. And that's because I'm doing my best at not presenting and thinking too much. So, but yes, of course, you're right. I am thinking, okay, I need an intro here. I need a close up of that. Of course I'm doing those things, but I'm trying to keep that part of my brain separate from the journey.
Yeah, because otherwise it influences totally. If you walk into your journey and you've got 100% of a shot list, you never are on the journey. You're always in the production studio, post-production, trying to put it together. So I see the authenticity of it. And I suppose that's the early days of people creating things. Before they become their own producers and they get influenced from too many other people, the authenticity of them as the character and the personality is the bit that people come to them for in the first place.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get onto the Barrier Reef trip, but the mistake that I made in the Barrier Reef trip is that because it had taken so long to build the canoe, I had these ideas in my head about how it should go, and I started not filming things because it wasn't really fitting the plan of what I expected to happen. And that's why the film is almost totally concentrated on the back end of it. That's where I just forgot all that shit. I'm just trying to survive this freaking thing. That's what's interesting. So I ended up, so I've really relearned that lesson. You had to keep relearning that lesson. But I planned too much, and it wasn't fitting my story, so I won't film that. You just got to film everything and then figure out afterwards what the story was.
Yeah, okay. And the story in itself, the journey in itself is the story. It doesn't matter about the ins and outs and sunrise, sunset every single day, taking you, through it systematically and through a time frame. It's about the overall expedition and the overall ethos and the mindset of why you did it in the first place. And that will bring me nicely into that one, because you did your stuff on terra firma. You went and did stuff on the Kimberley. You got your oil crates together, all drums together. The ocean going expedition to go and do the Barrier Reef. What was the inspiration? What was the thought process about why? Was it about, solo journey? Was it about being on the Barrier Reef? What was the reason for doing that one?
Well, generally, the theme that I've been pursuing is placing myself in historic situations with the same start materials, but not reenacting the journey, going on my own escape mission, but then also telling their story at the same time. Because because if you're reenacting someone else's journey, everyone knows what happens. It's kind of boring. but I keep referring to it theirs. So I was looking for another adventure. So after the Kimberley one, I was actually tried crossing a desert in Saudi Arabia with camels that I bought myself, and that was a bit of a nightmare, and it's very sandy. And as I was finishing that expedition, I was like, man, I just want to do one on the Great Barrier Reef with beautiful water.
I love the very sandy comment.
Yeah, it's very sandy.
It's a desert and there's camels. Well done. Yeah, you picked up that one.
That's right. So in other words, I wanted the extreme opposite of that. And so I've done a fair bit of stuff in the Barrier Reef and in northern waters, and I just was fantasizing about sailing on the Barrier Reef on a dugout canoe. How the hell I need a legitimate reason to build a dugout canoe. So then I started researching survival stories where that would make sense. And so that's where I found fairly quickly this guy called James Morrill, who was shipwrecked off the Queensland coast in 1846. As the ship was breaking apart, the crew made a raft and sailed it for 42 days to the mainland. 14 people died on the journey. 7 made it ashore. Only he survived. The other ones all died. He was a sole survivor from this wreck, but he had all these stuff that they'd taken from the wreck, maps, charts, and axe. He was a carpenter's mate. Now, he lived with Aboriginal people for 17 years. Then when white settlement swept past, he reassimilated, wrote a book. So that's how I know what he had. So he didn't build a dugout canoe. But once again, I don't recreate people's journeys. I just recreate the start conditions. And I also wanted to know, why didn't he try to escape? And so it wasn't just could he escape, but why didn't he want to? And I kind of answered that during the film, because I won't give away the film too much, but that was one of the things that I wanted to answer. So that's why I built this dugout canoe to it. And I had to then figure out, okay, where did people escape to? I knew people tried to get to Cape York. And so I did a recce up there. I ended up finding a guy in a lighthouse who told me the story about this thing called the Post Office Cave, which was built on Booby Island, which is in Torres Strait. And so when Governor Bligh got booted off the bounty, he went past on his way to Indonesia. And as he went through Torres Strait, he said, we need some kind of rescue haven on Cape York. And so when he became governor of New South Wales, which was then Queensland back then, he put a rescue haven on this island. And they chose a place called the Post Office Cave because ships had been leaving mail for each other since the late 1700s. So it was the no-brainer place. So they put rations and food and rum in this cave. And so it saved a bunch of different shipwreck survivors like the HMS Rattlesnake and HMS Rattlesnake. So that was my goal. I wanted to get to there. It was established 22 years before this guy was shipwrecked. He was a professional sailor. He would have known about it. He had charts. He had a sextant. No-brainer. Could he have used these tools and got there? And that gave me my excuse to build a dugout canoe.
Yeah, and like you say, not exactly entirely following the theme, but doing it in your own version, with the destination and the goal being the similar thing, but how you did the journey being very, very different. I'm going to give a little bit of a segue into, I did a canoeing kayaking trip, but mine was so different. So at the end of Best Job in the World, the CEO of Tourism Queensland said, what are we going to do next? There's loads of media, there's loads of publicity. How do we leapfrog on this? And I said, I've done loads of stuff on the land in Africa. I've done all these mountains. I want to do something on the ocean. And all the stories I was hearing in the media globally were that the Great Barrier Reef is dead and there's no point in visiting it. And I thought, all of these 6 months I've spent exploring the Barrier Reef, I've seen some epic places. Why don't I go and do a journey to retrace, in a way, Captain Cook's route up from 1770 all the way up through to Cooktown? That was my journey it was going to be. I did it on a plastic canoe, a Hobie Adventure Island with outriggers. I had a 40-foot support catamaran. There was, TV cameras on board. We had dive crews on board. So it was pretty overloaded with other people. However, I understand the excitement and the draw card of navigating around reefs and lonely coral cays and sand islands to get from one place to another. So when I saw this and you were doing this is well before Alone Stuff, I was just fascinated by the idea of you creating your own craft, building your own vessel, and then taking this journey. This has inspired me internally for a long, long time. The craft itself is a massive part of the story. So why, what, and how you got that to day one?
Sure. So I've explained the why. I guess the how was I searched the east coast of Australia for a large native log like it would have been used, jackfruit, breadfruit, white beech, but there was none available. I didn't want to cut one down because, that's just not real good. You can't do it in a national park. So I ended up finding a Norfolk pine near where I live, which is very similar to hoop pine, which grow at the place where he came ashore just south of Townsville called Cape Cleveland. So I got this big log delivered into my backyard. I thought, this will take 4 months to build. Took 14 months. And it
14 months.
Took 14 months, and that was a rush job too. So I did the first step of the step of the process with the tools that he had, and then I sped things up with power tools. So I did cheat. That's because Aboriginal people were already building dugout canoes on the Great Barrier Reef, and he probably would have, if he'd been wanting to build one, he would have had assistance from them. And it normally takes them about 3 or 4 months to build one. But even then,
Right.
by myself just took a long time with it. So even with a chainsaw, but I could have done the whole thing without one. It just would have taken me probably 4 years to do it.
But again, it's your own variation of a journey. You
Yeah.
started the idea, you got the concept, and you're just speeding it up to get yourself to the start point.
And I also, as you would have seen, some terrible conditions up there. I've had some near-death experiences in northern waters, including being in the Category 2 cyclone in a 4.2 metre boat and promising myself never to be in that situation again. So I've already got PTSD about the conditions up there. So every night I just lose sleep and think about what's going to happen if I get those conditions. And I just kept on moving the goalposts as far as how high the sides needed to be, how big and stable the outriggers needed to be. I need to put hatches on. What am I going to do about the crocs? So the goalposts kept shifting. So I ended up making pretty much a trimaran, whereas the initial thing was a dugout canoe. And every single one of those sleepless nights and creating those ideas eventually they all just saved me as I went up. As the expedition got harder and the conditions got worse and I got my condition reduced because of lack of water and food, all of those little safety features ended up saving me. And so if I'd gone earlier, it wouldn't have, I would have rolled over.
And usually that takes generations of shipbuilding knowledge to be passed on to get to that point of safety and security. You were very much jumping in at the deep end. Where did you draw your knowledge from on this? Was it, internet research? Was it just, hey, this is what I think it's going to be like?
I felt it would have been cheating to use plans because he wouldn't have had plans, but he'd sailed through Asia and stuff. And so I always look at dugout canoes. So I had certain things in mind, but a lot of the time I was making things up in my head. And in a book I wrote about this, I talk about where as a teenager, I was making a crossbow in my shed and I couldn't figure out how to do the trigger mechanism. And for months I was thinking about it. And then all of a sudden it came to me. And at that point on, from that point, I started to be able to visualize engineering solutions before they happen, test them, know with gut feeling whether that was going to work or not. So I think really what I was doing, like anything, if you play a musical instrument, you expand that part of your brain. I expanded the visualization engineering section of my brain as a teenager. And I've been training that muscle and giving it exercise throughout my life in making a bunch of dodgy craft.
Haven't you just?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of instinctive, like I can quickly go, yes, no, ooh. And so if something's not sitting right with me, I'll think about it for a week and I'll go, got it. I know what it is now. And so my intuition is quite good on it. So yeah, it's just a part of a brain that I've just, it's very fit. I used all those things.
Obviously, you spend that time, honing your skills and hewing something from this massive piece of wood. The moment that you launched that for the first time, I mean, were there dry runs? Was there just you must have sort of got it on the water and sort of gone with some tests and things like that. And where did that happen? Yeah, so there were multiple tests. The first one was a test in the pool, just to see how stable it was and whether it would actually float. I knew it would because its density is 0.7. It did float, it did leak. And then I did another one in sheltered waters to test the height of the outriggers. And then I did another one to test one of the sails. But the first proper ocean test was like just before I went on the expedition. And it was a bit of a nightmare. So the conditions weren't suitable. I went offshore. The top of the mast snapped. The wind switched direction offshore. And the current took me offshore. I ended up having a call for help from the cops and they towed me in. And Brilliant. They said, do you mind if we put that on our Facebook page? I'm like, but I didn't want to say no. But you know who you are immediately? This is Jess Watson, 16-year-old girl, hits the oil tanker or the coal tanker off Mackay. You've got to have these moments because they're the ones that make you question the next part.
Yes, you're totally right. And so you're learning from failure. Yeah. So it ended up as a national media story. And so that is why I ended up taking just a small electric engine like fishermen use, just to give myself an hour of battery power. Yeah, I really hated the hit that I had on the authenticity of my trip, but I just felt it would have been irresponsible to get. Yeah, it did reduce the chance that I need to be rescued again, and also had very robust procedures. Like I had my own life raft, effectively. Like if I got rolled over and I was about to die and I was going to have to set my EPIRB off, I didn't want to do that, so I had a stand-up paddleboard that I could blow up and paddle to the mainland. Even if it was 100 k's away, I'd probably still get there as long as the thing didn't puncture. But my one test sail didn't go well.
But I think that all those sort of safeguards that you're making, I think they are showcasing a level of responsibility to not have to get. You get the naysayers. You'll always get the people that are the commenters on the Facebook, whatever it is, that turn around and say, why are you doing this? Why are you putting this at risk? Because people like you need to go out there and push boundaries. But as long as you're giving yourself a little safety net, that means that you're doing your best in an adventurous mindset to make that expedition as safe as it potentially can be, considering the conditions you're setting up for it.
Exactly. And I got those comments on that post. It's in my film. All these people just saying, you idiot, you never should have done this. You're a fraud, all this kind of stuff. So, but
it's easy when they're typing it on their iPad, shoveling in trough food on the sofa, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
With a vessel like that, obviously, I'm thinking about my Hobie now. I'm thinking about the things that failed and went wrong. It's very easy to, message, phone Hobie and go, oh, my daggerboard pin's broken. Can you send me another one? On water or on land fixing of a raft of a vessel like that, how did you sort of take on the repairs to keep it going?
Yeah, well, as you say, little pin. So a week into it, the rudder pinion broke, and I managed to get ashore with my emergency oar, which I had for that kind of situation, and I managed to fix that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've got through the hardest part of my trip. Hit the water again, bang, my rudder snapped in half. And so just before that, though, I had actually cheated. So when the rudder pinion broke, I should have turned around. If I was doing this authentically, I would have turned around straight away and gone back up the thing. But I was worried about I knew the wind might get worse and I might get stuck in there for weeks. So I cheated and I used the engine for an hour. And after that, I felt really sick in the guts. I'm like, there's no point. If I'm going to do this and cheat, I'm actually wasting my time. Yeah. So I had this kind of like, no, I'm not.
Mental battle.
Yeah. So like, no, you can't cheat. Okay, all right. So then the rudder snapped. I'm like, right. So I'm on Great Barrier Reef Island, not allowed to cut down trees. So the only thing that I could use to fix the rudder was driftwood, and I couldn't find any anyway. So I went through this long thing of how to fix the rudder in a completely different way, and using all those skills that I actually learnt building the thing, managed to make this Frankenstein dodgy rudder, which lasted for the rest of the trip. But I was very cautious after that. I'm like, I just felt like everything was going to snap the whole rest of the way because it was always an inch away from snapping.
Where did you start and where did you naturally end? So this obviously is a journey. If no one knows about it, you had 1,500 kilometers-ish of journey. Were you sort of staying on islands? Were you coming back into the mainland? How did it work over that timescale you were on the water?
So I started south of Townsville, about 30 to 50 k's in a place called Cape Cleveland, and I finished at Thursday Island. So in a straight line, it's probably, I don't know, 1,100 k's. But if you go all the zigzag and around all that kind of stuff, and the fact that you've got to go in and around bays, it's about 1,500. So yeah, it was just the Achilles heel that I had that you wouldn't have had in yours is that I can't sail upwind at all. Yeah, it'll point into the wind 15 degrees, but because of leeway, I'm actually going sideways, which means if I miss the back of an island, I'm gone. I'm downwind. And if the only thing behind me is a lee shore, I will get smashed up. If I can survive the swim ashore, I've lost my canoe. So that's one Achilles heel. The other one is it's too heavy to pull up the beach. So the only safe option for me is to anchor. So that means to have to find a safe anchorage, and that's bloody hard work, right? Because in a kayak, you don't need it, because I've sea kayaked up there in homemade sea kayaks and stuff. If it's getting bad, you just pull it up the beach and you wait it out. But for me, So and that's also why I chose to sleep on board, because it's so much effort, so much risk walking through the water in up to your neck or your waist with crocs around. It was safer for me to sleep on board, which is why I made croc hatches. So if the crocs around, I'd put the hatches back down and stuff like that. So that was I had to find a safe anchorage because I didn't want to be going out overnight because dealing with really bad conditions at night is even more dangerous.
So really you were at the mercy very much of the elements, a bit like, Cook with the HMB Endeavour. At that stage, there was a big thumping great hull on the boat. There was no keel. There was no way of sailing upwind. It was all waiting for the wind to turn in the right direction. Obviously, as you get to the northern end of the Barrier Reef, you've got vast tides, great movement of tides, especially up towards the Torres Strait. How were you getting information on the decision-making to go or not go? I mean, are you able to use technology for this, or were you looking at the winds and looking at the tide charts?
I was looking at the winds, and I knew that because I'm committed to the ocean all day, it's not like you can wait for the tide to be correct because there's 4 tides a day up there. So it's kind of like I'm committing. The next safety is, 12 hours away, the next anchorage. So there's no point waiting for the tide. So it didn't really matter. But there were times when I'm like, okay, the tide's pretty, high now, which means that it will soon be coming out and therefore it'll be wind against tide, or the conditions are going to be worse. When I select a sail, I should be conservative here and use the smaller sail. Or sometimes I'll be like, okay, I'm going to be. So basically, what I'm saying there is, for 6 hours a day, the conditions are going to be worse when the tide's going opposite direction to the wind.
Yeah.
So I'd base my sail selection on that. But then other times I'll be like, in 6 hours' time, I'm going to be in what I think is a more exposed area. So I'm going to take a higher risk now and put up a sail that's way too big for this wind, and see if I can rush through that danger area before the tide changes. And so that's how things started to come into cropper, because I was having to commit to using sail that was too big, but that was to mitigate another risk. So every decision had 100 different factors.
This is the engineer, the navigator, the adventurer, all Lockean decision making. The voices that are making yay or nay decisions was all within you, within Mike's head himself. External contact and communications with people during the journey. I mean, if something had come up as a weather scenario, were people able to relay you information?
I did have that capability, but I chose not to use it. And so I had a Zoleo, which is a satellite tracker.
Yeah.
So I would send my mum a location ping twice a day, so she would know where I was in case I got eaten by a croc. And otherwise, I wouldn't know exactly where I was at all.
Yeah.
So that the capability was there, but I was generally just making decisions off what I saw. And so the other thing too, as a pilot, if it's looking too risky, you can always stay on the ground. And so as a sailor, you can always stay in the port. But the other factor was I didn't have there was water, not having enough water on islands, and also there was some bloody big crocs around. And so towards the end, the time that I committed to the worst conditions and really had the worst experience was when it didn't feel safe to stay in the anchorage because there was a croc hanging around. So it's like, I can't just sit here. I can't be the pilot that sits on the ground and waits for the conditions to get better. So there was all of these different factors, and that's why I took a bigger, riskier decisions, but there was no low risk option.
The navigation for the northern end of the Great Barrier Reef is renowned for being a very, very difficult place to get through. Were you able to use charts? Was it line of sight? How were you finding your anchorages? How did you know where you were heading to?
Okay, so he had charts, and he had a sextant, so I could tell how far north I was by taking a noonday sight. For the almost one up until Princess Charlotte Bay, it's just map to ground. The next headland I can see it. Yep, navigation's easy. Once you get past north of Flinders Island, there you basically almost lose sight of land completely, and to the west you just see this continuous line of mountains and you can't really make visual features. So from that point there, I would go up, thinking that this reef, but they all start looking the same after a while. So when I got to a place, I don't want to mention the names because I don't like giving the increasing traffic places to get, but there was this one island where I'm like, okay, I had to wait because the wind had switched direction, so I had to wait till the wind switched enough to the south that I could continue, and so I just took a noonday sight to help get my position. But the other thing was, though, I also had to respect the no-go fishing zones. So I did have Great Barrier Reef Marine Park maps because
you can't pull up in a green zone.
That's right. And yes, I know I could have probably got away with it, but part of the message that I wanted to send is the seas up there are overfished. I didn't catch a single fish for the first till I got well past Cooktown. I didn't catch a fish on my crappy old lures, right?
No way.
But when I got past that, I started to catch fish. And so I was trying to include the sanctuary zones and the fact that I've got to pull in my lines here and stuff because there's so many people fishing in the oceans that there's not enough fish left. So we've got to decide whether it's responsible to keep increasing our population. So that allowed me to tell that story. And there's also the legal aspect of not fishing in a marine park zone. So I did have better maps. And yes, of course, when I'm looking at a map, I'm like, okay, well, that helps because I'm looking at a modern chart. But I had the means to be able to do it other ways, and I would use the sextant to double check my latitude.
I think, though, that it's nice that you're sort of wrapping in the morality of it, the sustainability of it, the way you can evolve an old-fashioned way of doing it and turn it into your modern storytelling or your craft production or whatever else. That becomes your journey. That's the authenticity of it. You don't have to fabricate everything from scratch. It's about, this is the way I've decided to do it. And then your storytelling is more natural because it is about you not trying to do everything as a carbon copy, but it's Mike's journey now. It's all of a sudden it's your version.
Yeah, exactly. And that gives me also on the land because in Australia, most of the land was managed intensively by Aboriginal people with traditional burning. And there was a lot more food sources for the animals, and they could also increase the amount of desirable food for humans to eat. So it's harder to live off the land now than it would have been for my shipwreck survivor. So that gave me the excuse to tell that story and to compare images of Grassy Hill at Cooktown, which was called Grassy Hill because it was covered in grass. There's photos of it from the 1800s covered in grass with only a few trees. And Captain Cook said it described it that way, and his artist drew it that way. And now it's just solid jungle with no grass. So that gave me the excuse to tell those stories as well. So yeah, it's harder to live off the land because Aboriginal people there's less plants and animals, desirable ones, and it's hard to live off the ocean because it's overfished.
Yeah,
and there's coral bleaching and all the other stuff.
It's a different landscape, hey? It's a very different landscape above and below that water now. Thursday Island was the destination. How long was it taking you to get into Thursday Island?
Well, it was actually Booby was the destination, but as I got closer to Booby, I'd been asking for over a year to AMSA, Australian Maritime Safety Authority, whether I could have permission to land there because they own it. Because there's some old lighthouse buildings that are abandoned, it's got asbestos, and they just would not give me permission to land. Because I'm trying to make a feature film, you do have to have permission for stuff.
Yeah.
But I was secretly glad that I couldn't because it was downwind of Thursday Island. I never would have been able to get the canoe back. And even if I'd had someone come out and towing it into, 30-knot headwind, with, it probably would have been destroyed. So it was only an extra half-day sail from Thursday, but I was glad to have the excuse that I couldn't go there. But I definitely could have got there. So in the end, I ended up flying out there by chopper and hovering next to it, because I wasn't allowed to land, but so I could see in there, and that helps to complete the story. That because the viewer's been hearing about this place the whole time, and so I can show them me next to the chop, hanging out the window of the chopper, going, "Hey, here it is."
What was your headspace for the last week? It's always that sort of. It's the same with anybody that's planning a big journey, whether it is something as vast as this or whether it is their first, trek in the Himalayas. You put so much into the training, the build, the get to day one, the relief of day one, the adventure of the journey. And if you've done enough of the planning, the journey almost becomes secondary to the planning. Once you get to that final week, that's where the head swings from what is ahead of me to what is after this. How do you deal with that side of things?
Well, for me, I was so focused on just trying to bloody survive that the biggest emotional, it started when I ran to Cape York, because I'd almost bought the farm a couple of times before Cape York, and I'd been sending Mum extra location pings, and we never discussed it, but she knew what it meant. It meant that I thought the risk of me rolling over, it makes me a bit teary just talking about it. So I knew she'd be so worried. So I was just so relieved that I got
constantly checking in with Mum. It's so damn good that she is the important person in all of this.
Yeah, so when I got to the other side, I knew how relieved she'd be.
And then you get to the end of this journey. Do you pick up the phone and speak to Mum? Is that the first time you've spoken in months?
Well, actually, there is a couple of bars of coverage on Cape York, and so I did call her, and that was to, hey, I'm here, and then but it still was actually very tricky. I thought it would be plain sailing after that. It was still very dodgy just to get to Thursday. I don't really cover that in the film that much, just because there was so much other drama. I just like people need a break from the drama. But so the other thing that started to creep in there, which I didn't expect, and so I met up with a traditional owner in Horn Island, and she was the one that gave me permission for that area and stuff. And so as we flew out to Booby Island, that's her country, and her people used to take dugout canoes out there. And she was telling me about the massacres of 500 of her people. We flew over that valley, and I'd been interviewing Aboriginal people all the way up the coast and hearing firsthand those accounts. I'd been studying the history, looking at the newspaper articles, and really I knew about the Frontier War, but I did not have any idea about the extent and severity of it. So and this other weird thing, because I was so worried about my mum worrying about me, I had to have this kind of thing like, imagine what it must have been like for Aboriginal people when their own parents and their kids are all dying. So I kind of, in a twisted way, kind of linked those two things together. I'm not saying that what I went through is anything like what Aboriginal people went through, but but I ended up finding myself in a grieving process for about a year and a half afterwards, where I was like, wow, it's just so freaking sad. Because I can now visualize those people and where they were and what this shipwreck survivor described in detail in his book. And it's really devastating. So it's a grieving process, which I'm now kind of through, but it was I think as a nation, we need to go through that process so we can move forward, because we keep suppressing, we know all about it. We don't, man. There's a lot more. We have to go. We need a 5 or 10 year process where we just literally go, right, this is what happened. We need to do some investigations. Get out all the way. A little bit like if you're a person in your 40s and you did some, I've got to be careful here. what happened in the past isn't the responsibility of anything that anyone happened today. If you had stuff in your past and you haven't really emotionally dealt with it, it's hard for you to progress as a person because you're still, there's guilt and stuff there and there's suppression. We need to get all that stuff out. That'll make us feel better. It'll make Aboriginal people feel better. And then as a national, we're having a national identity crisis at the moment. That will solve our national identity crisis because we can identify ourselves as people who genuinely understand what happened and genuinely go, well, we really need to give these guys a break and some respect. And then it will be much easier for us to later on, when we're feeling the guilt, go, I know we've dealt with that, but we haven't dealt with it yet.
And it's more than just the sorry, it's understanding, it's being there in time in person to actually hear the story, to do that journey with them as much as you can through their eyes and through their storytelling. Your time with First Nations people is obviously so vitally important. It's a big part of, your Northern Territory experiences. It is when you get up to Thursday Island. It's not Auntie Enid by any chance that you were with up there?
It is.
No way. I know Auntie Enid. So she took us to an incredible. So in COVID, we were restricted to where we could take our clients. And I was like, where on earth do we take people to a real adventure in Queensland for Queenslanders as far as we could travel? And we contacted the Outrigger Club up on Thursday Island. We contacted Denny Burke and Rhys Davis. And we said, hey, we want to come and do a 10-day paddle. And they said, we've never paddled around Murralag, around Prince of Wales Island. Let's go and do that as a journey. And we spent 10 days on the ocean with them, fishing in the waters. And Auntie Enid took us to the sacred spot of one of their waterfalls. And again, that experience of being with her, well, what we thought was a 45-minute walk ended up being a 7-hour walk, was so instrumental in the storytelling she did just on the ground. So I've had a very small touch point with it, but I fully understand that deep connection to country that they have, and how until we're there and we are sweating it out and we're pulling the bush back and we're sitting down and we're hearing the stories, we cannot have that full connection and therefore resolution.
Yeah, pretty much. And not everybody will be able to sit down with Enid and experience that. But I think just historically, if we just really just sort out the history books a little bit better, like it recently happened in Western Australia that the governor, or what do you call it, the dude in charge of Western Australia said, look, I've got to be honest here. This was a massacre. Hundreds of your people were massacred, and we're just going to just correct the history here because this is what happened. And the commissioner, the governor of WA, actually did the research himself from the journals and goes, you know what? Yep, that was a massacre. This wasn't a skirmish. So it's just going through that process on a national scale. It's not just a politician saying sorry. It's correcting the history books. And straight away when you say that now, people go, oh, you're just putting your own facts in there. It's like, no, this is about the actual facts that are actually written down in the journals and the newspaper articles that we're not really acknowledging.
I was just thinking there, the storytelling that goes on and has done for generations of Aboriginal people in Australia is passed on from one to another. You are very much a storyteller in your own right now. When you get to the end of a journey, like you did on the water, on your vessel, on the Great Barrier Reef, the relief you must have of having all of that content, all of that stored data, all of that information safely locked away. That is your storytelling. How do you turn that into something that's ready for, TV screens and big screens around the world?
Yeah. So there's so much footage, and I started going through the footage, and then I went, I really need to write a book, because I kind of felt I should have written a book about the Kimberley one. And I'm like, if I'm going to write a book, I may as well do it now. And then that secretly, I knew that I need to really distill the important elements of this. That'll help me tell the story better on film. So then I wrote a book, which took a year, and then I gave it to an editor and stuff. And she said, oh yeah, that's all great, Mike. You know what? You never mentioned your family once in there. And I'm like, oh, I kind of get sick of reading books and people talk about the family stuff. And it's like a little bit like in the movies, it's all this token stuff. And I was like, all right. But then I decided, okay, I'm just going to be really honest about both how my wife and I deal with these things.
Yeah.
And, there's some friction there, but there's also coping mechanisms. And so I kind of concentrated on that rather than all the lovey-dovey stuff. So that was really important. And then so when I started doing the film, I'm like, I really need to include that in the film. So then I went and asked my neighbor to interview my wife. And so the process of writing a book really helped me to understand the best way to tell it in the visual sense as well. And it also, writing the book forced me to analyze my emotions. Like it took me about 6 months to realize that I was in a grieving process. So yeah, the realizations take a while to come out. So if you were to try and edit this straight away, you haven't really learnt the lessons yet, because your mind's sticking them all together. So this expedition was now 4 years ago. So, and the film, I only finished the film like halfway through this year. So it's been a bloody long journey. But that journey has actually still been happening since I finished the film. So yeah, what I'm saying is it's a bloody big effort. That's another reason I want to do YouTube, where it's shorter adventures. You get it out there and you move on to the next one. You know?
Yeah, because that, again, so much emotional and physical and time investment into the creation, the delivery, and the editing, and then the redelivery of a story. Are you looking for? Do you get external views on how to produce a story, or does it all come from inside your own head?
Oh, I mean, I'm constantly watching films and making notes and liking the way that they did that. And so I've got just pages and pages of notes and stuff about and trying to I love the way that. So I'm benefiting from other people's storytelling stuff and copying all over the place, just their technique.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then also when I finished the film, I obviously sent it to a bunch of people who are quite experienced in film stuff. Probably the most important one is the lady, Jemima Robinson. She runs the Banff Film Festival in Australia. She's constantly curating films for live audiences and stuff. So she was like, oh yeah, I think you need more of this, 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 and this. And I'm like, yep, I'm going to do whatever she says, because she understands outdoor content like mine, and she understands audiences. So there was some no-brainers there. So I definitely had some help from other people, for sure.
For people that are starting out in their early expedition or adventure careers, and they are looking at gear and assets to take on those journeys with them to capture it, you've probably evolved your technology suite, your waterproof backpack. What did you start with, and what are you now using as your must-have shooting gear?
Well, I mean, when I started out on the Kimberley one with probably about 7 different cameras, my primary camera was a handy cam. They're actually a very useful thing.
Yeah,
a handy cam, more so than an SLR, like a conventional style looking thing. So there's a bunch of GoPros, drones, and that kind of stuff. And then on this one, I did take a mirrorless Sony A7S III, shallow depth of field lens, all that kind of stuff. It really only came out on land though, because it wasn't waterproof. So, but I'll tell you what I'm doing now. I'm thinking when I go YouTube, I'm thinking about doing it all on my mobile phone.
Right. So becoming that as your journey. It's so condensed. It is so refined. It is so simple. I now take mine only on our Arctic expeditions. I used to go with a DSLR that became a mirrorless, that became a DJI Action. And now, unfortunately, it is just the iPhone 15.
And what is so great about the phone is that the viewfinder is so detailed that you can see much better. Like, I mean, you look on the back of a GoPro, you look on the back of an SLR, there's this tiny little thing. You can kind of, and so as long as you can ignore yourself enough when you're seeing yourself on there, you can be a much better director in shot with the mobile phone, because the monitor's so good. And it's also because it's right in your pocket. There's, particularly when you're starving and you're tired, it's less effort in pulling that out and setting it up. It's like, it's just there. And so that's that.
And it's one thing to charge. If you are dependent on solar or wind or water power, whatever you are, that's that one thing to charge. Would you shoot using this is an insider's sort of tech geeky thing. Would you use the native app in there for filming, or have you got a specialist app now that's purely for video?
I use the native app. Yeah. I find the other ones, they're not as easy to manage, because Apple just puts all its life in it. I think ignore LUTs and all of that complicated crap and S-Log, and go auto for everything, because then otherwise if you're presenting, you're having to think about technical stuff and you're ruining your authenticity. Everything on auto, unless you're like, okay, now I'm playing the cameraman and I'm taking a really nice shot of this wallaby. Okay, maybe I'll change the depth of field. Maybe I'll do some other stuff, because that's just going to be a B-roll shot, which is less important really. But I'm always chucking time-lapse cameras down. So I would still have a bunch of GoPros, so I can go, you know what? I want a shot, because I'm going to be working on this. I want the shadow of that tree going over there, because the audience will know in 5 seconds straight away, oh, he's been there all day doing that.
Yes.
Or there's an awesome thunderstorm building. So if you've only got one camera, you can go like, oh, you've got to stop your time-lapse to film something. So I'm always putting time-lapses out. And a drone really is important.
Oh, isn't it? Just for that positioning of where you are and the scale and the volume of a space.
Yeah. And also the immediate replay on a phone, you can tell very quickly scrub through and go, that's a good take. Yeah, no worries. If it's in a camera, it's harder to do. With cameras, it takes 5 seconds from when you turn the camera on to when it wakes up and then you hit record and it thinks about it. That 5 seconds is really bloody important if you nearly trod on a snake.
Missed a shot. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
So, yeah, there's a bunch of reasons where I reckon I might try and do it. And the other thing I'm trying to do, it hasn't been solved yet, is I want to shoot square sensor. So I can make, primarily if I'm going landscape, later on I can turn it into a decent vertical. People say you can crop and all that kind of stuff, but it changes everything. You really,
doesn't it just?
Yeah, you need a massive wide square sensor that's kind of like 4K in a square. And after in post, you can do whatever. That
so
hasn't
you
been
punch
solved.
everything down the dead center and shoot it like that, and then edit afterwards.
Well, what I would do is I would decide what is my primary content thing here. Okay, I'm primarily shooting for YouTube. I primarily want landscape, so I would want it letterbox. So through the viewfinder, I'm primarily aiming for landscape composition of the shot. But afterwards, when I want to put it on Instagram, I've got the top and bottom. So that hasn't been solved yet.
And absolutely. I was only talking about this a week ago with some guys we were shooting with. Exactly that. It hasn't really been solved about, do I have the camera this way? Do I have the camera that way? We were doing a canoe trip with some clients down on the Nimboida River, and one was shooting it always like this, and I was shooting it like this, because you're satisfying the platforms that you want to showcase your things on. And if your YouTube is your output, hey, the TV screen is wide. It's beautiful to see everything in widescreen. It's better for landscape. Make that your hallowed ground.
Yeah, exactly. But then later on, when you want to kind of put the dregs on another platform in the other orientation, you've got it all there. Yeah, the composition won't be perfect, but who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not. But the iPhone 17 is kind of getting there. One of the cameras that's shooting square sensor, but it drops out the stabilization, and it's like, oh, it's not there yet. But I reckon in a year, hopefully Apple, someone, I don't care, just someone solve that problem, please.
Yeah. It's a very, very different mindset to Alone. We've got to touch on it at some point. Series 1 of Alone, that amazing concept where you're thrown out into the wilderness and you've got to survive for as long as you can. It had gone globally. It had gone pretty big globally across the US and other places, and then it came to Australia. It was very different from a single iPhone to shoot everything to make an episode or a series. How did you find out about Alone? How did you decide to get onto it? And then B, what was that transition like from a single piece of gear to film to what you were expected to use on a day-to-day basis?
I watched some of the American series, not all of them, but then my mate just sent me one Sunday afternoon an advertisement that Alone Australia had come up. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And so I just basically dropped everything, put the whole application in, and then I started binge watching all of the American ones.
Yes.
And then, so I managed to get in. So this was actually, I'd done that Barrier Reef trip beforehand. So when they say, can you send in any footage of you surviving? I'm like, stand by to receive. So, but as for the equipment, so I'd already shot the Barrier Reef. So the equipment on Alone was simpler. There's no drones. There's a big battery that you charge from, there's a hell of a lot less for me to manage, because I'm normally doing my own solar panels and charging this and doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm saving all the footage and I'm reviewing all the footage. Yeah, that's a 2-hour task every day, which I didn't have to do. In fact, we weren't allowed to review footage, because they don't want you to see yourself and second guess things and whatever. So
did you maybe take from that a big battery is the way to go in the future?
Well,
was that a learning point?
Well, no, because I'm doing it depends what kind of thing I'm doing. Yeah, I did have a big battery on the Barrier Reef trip, but it's just the solar panels kept dying and the connections kept rusting and the things just kept burning out. So, but when I hike, you can't take a big battery. So yeah,
true.
Yeah.
You obviously start an expedition, a journey like that with Alone, where you've got your survival items, you've got your 10 items that you can take and things like that. When you had your 10 items, for instance, that you would have put front and center of anything else to take on the Great Barrier Reef expedition, obviously that changes to when you're sitting still on a Tasmanian lump of land.
Yep.
Your 10 items to get you on the Great Barrier Reef journey that you now would take if you had a choice to change things. Let's just go with a couple of them.
On the Barrier Reef?
Yeah, I mean, it's coming down to feeding yourself as much as anything and making water, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so fishing gear is extremely important. Fishing line and fishing hook, a knife, a method of starting fire. Although on the Barrier Reef, the conditions pretty easy to start your own fire. If you, once I'd selected my own nice dry piece of beach hibiscus, if I could keep it dry, I could get a fire going pretty easy.
Yeah.
So I mean, having something warm, it's not that important up there either. You can get away. Well, in the dry season, it's pretty chilly. So yeah, I mean, really, knife, fire, fishing. You do need something to protect yourself from the sun. You can make hats and stuff out of pandanus and stuff, but you really need full body coverage if you're going to be out from sunrise to sunset on a dazzling tropics.
Are you an absolute believer? I mean, there is the sort of survival triangle, isn't there, of the shelter, of the water, and the food. I tried to teach that to my little boy Atlas. Is that a foundation that you use, or do you adapt that? Shelter's not the most important thing. How does that work in your head now as a survivalist?
The priorities vary depending on the situation and location. So the Air Force, when you get a combat survival course, it's all about, it must be protection, location, water, and food. Whereas the Army North Force way is based on the Aboriginal one, which is you just do what's common sense at the time. Right. So, like you're not going to die of cold up in the Northern Australia. So shelter is less important. So yeah, Australia, if you're in the desert, water. Yeah. So yeah, it's very situationally dependent. I don't stick to any like checklist.
The basic skills of survival, when you're in different locations, obviously it changes. It's very different from, like you say, in the north, in the south, where it's wet, where it's cold, where it's dry. When you're setting up yourself in Tasmania for the first time, your key concerns obviously are staying warm and staying dry there. And food sort of is secondary to that. It's really about that existence in space more than anything to start off with.
Yeah, I mean, I never considered Tasmania cold. I mean, I'm a ski instructor. I'm a snow survival instructor. I've skied solo across Iceland. It was like a holiday going to Tasmania because,
there's colder and there's wetter.
Well, we weren't above the snow line. I almost feel embarrassed saying it's cold weather because like when you've been in minus 30, minus 15 in the Arctic and stuff, it's like you don't, you dream about Tasmania and you think, oh, wouldn't that's so cozy down there. Like I'm not trying to
don't you also? Well, I firmly believe it is easier to die in the Australian high country than it is in the Arctic at minus 30 because of the saturation and the 1 degree and the 2 degree.
Totally. Yes. You're totally right. Yeah.
If you're in it.
Yeah. You're better off being safely below zero so you're not getting wet. Yeah. But down there, the other thing too is we had modern equipment. So, you have wet weather gear. So, and you're stationary. So, if it's raining, I generally just stayed under my shelter. Because there were so many tasks to do, like making traps and nets and things like that, that I just chose to spend that time under my shelter making stuff. And then when it wasn't raining, then I'd go and do those kinds of tasks. So it's pretty chilled. Whereas on the Barrier Reef, it was just, so many difficult decisions, life and death decisions all the time.
Yeah. The fascination of watching you on Alone, compared to so many other people, I think, and so I've watched a good few of them internationally. You're a crafter, you're an engineer, you love making things. That was my fascination about how much you can make out of so little, but how deeply unsuccessful some of it was. I mean, did it frustrate you? Or was it just nice to have an outlet to be able to make things?
Oh, it was definitely frustrating. Yeah. I mean, I did catch quite a few fish and eels and stuff like that, which they didn't really show. They glossed over that. I did actually get a paddy melon in my trap, and I got a quail as well. They chose not to show it. Yeah. So there was more successes going on than was shown. So, but yes, it is frustrating. But what's key there is just like, if it's really frustrating, okay, how do I fix it? Yeah. And so for example, the paddy melon that I got in my trap, it broke out of the trap because the net wasn't strong enough. So, I swore my head off. By that afternoon, I'd already come up with a solution to make a different net, a stronger net. So, when you get those Christmas decorations where you get that thing and you slice it and you pull it apart like that. Yeah. So I had enough tarp left over, and I just spent almost a week slitting this tarp. So it's went open like that. It's so strong that I couldn't even break it like that. Wow. So when I was removed, I had a trap that had proven to catch paddy melons, and that was now definitely strong enough to hold it.
So the thing that takes people over the edge, it seems the majority of the time, the one that makes them, pick up that sat phone and make that call to finish their time away and being actually alone, is that draw to family and to people. Was that the overarching factor for you that really pulled you out, or was it always the weight issue?
They pulled me out.
Yeah.
So I would, so
does that come into your headspace, though, of this is coming more and more across my radar, where I'm saying I need to be with the people that I love and care about, I'm missing out on part of their life? Or was that
not
just something you managed to isolate yourself from?
not at all. No. So like, I mean, I just come off the Barrier Reef for 50 days.
Yeah.
My wife would rather I stay out there for an extra month and bring home money than come home and go, I'm going to come home and be a good dad and come home early. It's like that argument, that's people making excuses for themselves when they're out there.
Yeah.
You know, you're not that critical. You've been away for 2 months. Doesn't make any bloody difference, mate. If you get home 2 weeks earlier, what you should have done was stay out there for another 2 weeks and come home with the 250 grand. You know what I mean? So, but I'm not saying that you should never leave. So if I thought that I was doing my body damage, I would have left. So I remember some fairly well-known commentator in Australia going, "Oh, Mike's just like my father. Once he would never leave." It's like, oh, that's insulting. Thanks. Like, I will leave something if I don't think the risks are worth the reward. You know. So, but I just they remove me, and it's like, I don't think you need to do this.
It was continuing your norm from going from sort of lone wilderness style expeditions into a lone wilderness space. So it was really continuing the sort of normality of your life. So the other people that pull themselves out and hit that evacuate button are the ones that haven't had that disconnection from family enough to sort of make it the normal. It's something that plays over and over in their head every day.
You are 100% correct. The first time I went out by myself camping overnight, I was 18. I was in Italy, and it scared the crap out of me. It felt way outside my comfort zone. It's only, I'm just now, that's part of my comfort zone just because I've done it many, many times. And I didn't do it because I wanted to go alone. It's just that I was in a place where my best mate wasn't there anymore. And if I didn't go, I'd miss out. Yes. And so that's what, but then when you start going down the track of doing everything by yourself all the time, you don't have to find someone else that's competent, has time off work, has the equipment. Yeah, there's so much freedom. You don't need to compromise. You can just do whatever you want. So that's that. Once you start realizing that, and you get it just feels normal being by yourself. You can just do anything. Yeah. And so I knew, like, I'm lucky that I can go home and have a really nice family. A lot of people don't have that to come back to. So rationalizing that's easy.
So the part then that naturally flows into is, you talked about the ghostwriter of the book saying, hey, what about the family story that goes in the background? The family story in the background is something that is there. It's beautiful. It's fixed. It's continued. You can return back into it. How does it work with your partner and with the kids when something new comes up? Is it hey guys, you know what I've been doing for the last few years? We're going to keep doing some of that. Or is it oh Dad, I've got a few things coming up. Any chance you can stick around for these ones? How does that work for you?
Okay. So that, in a way, my wife has seen this from the start. Our second date, I took her to the Kimberley. We chartered a tropical, got dropped out on the coast. We walked back. I took her on a 500-kilometer tinny journey. She pretended to enjoy it. She did actually enjoy it, but after being married, that's not really her thing. And I am very lucky. Like we've trekked in Nepal and stuff, and it's not her thing, but she'll still go on those things and she will take enjoyment from it. But she doesn't like those things. But I guess what I'm saying is, from the very start, she's seen me that I was doing these things. That is who I am, and that is why after a while I started. I used to take girls out to dinner, but after a while I realized, no, first date, I'm taking them camping, because if they don't like it, what's the point?
Make it real.
And that is advice for young people. If you're an outdoors person, go on your first and second dates outdoors, because if they don't like it, you haven't got the right person.
Yeah. How did you meet, you two? What was the first touch point?
She was selling real estate and I was looking for investment property.
Oh, right. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. That's not what I was expecting, but there you are.
Yeah. So, so when I do these things, she's always known, because, from the first deep and meaningful conversation, she would have known, I'm a pilot, because I was already a pilot, because I saw that as a kid, and I also want to be the bush tucker man. So she's always known. That helps. In some ways, she'd probably rather I was into golf and into fancy dinners, but she does understand that this is what makes me tick, and I am very fortunate that she supports me as I do these things. Like the last 5 years, after I did save up a whole stack of money in Saudi Arabia, working for British Aerospace, instructing Saudi Air Force pilots. So like I got the family finances sorted before I started stepping off into this world of no money for a long time. That's just starting to turn now, though, but it's been 5-6 years. But she's been holding the fort, during that time financially, in that she's got the full-time job, and sometimes I'm going away. I'm actually at home a lot of the time. Really most of the last 4 years I've been at home editing, writing books. And so I'm there for all the kids. I'm the one that does the school pickups and a lot of the time, and running the appointments. So that's a great thing. It's actually a better family life than if I was working 9 to 5. So
how old are the kids, and are they getting involved? I mean, are they the same as you and your dad, where they're out camping from the early days? Have they some rejected it? Are they loving it? What's the story, if you don't mind me asking?
I was very
I'm
careful.
curious about my boy Atlas. That's all.
Well, how old's he?
8.
Okay, I was very careful. So the bush tucker man's son, I flew choppers with him in the army. He hates bush tucker and he hates that stuff. And I think it's because he's just sick of people talking about it. So I was quite conscious of that. And so we did the South Coast track in Tasmania, a week-long hike when he was 3. He's been camping since he was 3 weeks old in Kakadu. I've got a picture of him, Ockie strapped him into a camp chair so he didn't fall forward because he couldn't sit up. But I've always, when it gets really difficult, I've always tried to shield him from of hating it, because I don't want him to. But he's definitely not as an outdoorsy guy like me. But we've done some pretty long trips. We're going to go to the South Coast track again. We've done Nepal, and he generally does complain a fair bit and whinge when we go on a hike. But then come the next holidays, he goes, "Hey, Dad, can we go on another hike?" And I go, "How long do you want to go for?" 4 days. And he'll go on that 4 days, and he won't have a smile on his face the whole time. But he's realised it's not this pleasurable thing that you do at the time. He's figured out that there's a reward to it.
Yeah. So there's an interesting. So the custodians of Lady Elliot, the Gash family, Julie Gash, we know really well. And every time I used to take Atlas there when he was like 3 or 4 years old, and I was trying to force the snorkel on him, she always said to me, "You can never make a kid love a new activity on their first experience. You can only make them hate it if you do it wrong." So getting them in that comfortable space, I love that phrase, because I don't push it now. I really don't push it. It's just like, if you want to, you'll do it. But we sow that seed in their head that might germinate like a cicada. 7 years down the line, it might be a long time before they actually realise that passion and that link that they've gained was from those early days of us exposing them to it.
Yep. My sister got turned off skiing because she was forced to go skiing in a blizzard. Whereas I fell in love with skiing, and I'm not happy to put up with a blizzard because it means I get to go skiing. So yeah, I totally agree. That's can you say that one again? I want to remember that.
You can only make, you can't make a kid fall in love with something by doing it for the first time, but you can make them hate it.
Love it.
Yeah. I've got some quick fires for you. One item of old school bushcraft knowledge that deserves a comeback.
Friction fire.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. One of the hardest ones, but if you've got the elements and you've got the materials, one of the easiest ones to pull off. Is that right?
Yep. And just do bow drill. Don't worry about the hands one, because you won't have the strength, the hand toughness, or the skill at selecting the right materials. Just Google bow drill. You use your shoelaces. It's the only man-made. You don't even need that. You can make your own string, but just shoelaces are good. Definitely a skill worth learning.
Love it. If there's one survival tip you wish that every outdoors enthusiast, whether it's a trail runner or a hiker or even a four-wheel drive camper in Australia, could understand better, what would it be?
Like a knowledge thing.
Yeah, just something that they
understand to get how to get orientation from the sun.
Yeah,
a lot of people have no clue.
This not nearly as basic as celestial, but using the solar.
Well, no,
direction.
It is because solar's celestial as well. It's just like, I mean, if I do this all the time. I was just helping out on a Duke of Ed camp. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I say, "Okay, everyone, which way is west?" Silence.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, the sun's there. Which way does the sun set? Silence.
Wow. And it is that total acidification. Attenborough describes it as acidification, where we're so disconnected from the elements that are above us and around us every single day. To reconnect to that is the most simplistic thing in the world. And
it helps in everyday life. Like when I'm catching a taxi or a bus or something, I'm just subconsciously looking where the sun is. No, I'm looking at the stars and going, hang on a sec. We're going to the west. We should be going here. This taxi driver's going the wrong. Hey, mate, what are you doing? like even just a city navigation, understanding the sun is really useful, and the stars.
You talk about one of the bits of gear that you were going to have for alone was a customized Leatherman. My bit of gear that I always get asked about, what's the one thing that if you could have a bit of gear that you take with you everywhere? My Leatherman Wave from 2001 is still my Leatherman Wave, and I still love it. What's your one thing if you got it?
Well, that is a very tough question. Either that or just a decent small machete.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd probably go the decent small machete because you can now use it like an axe. I know you can do that. It's a very tough one. I don't know.
That's right. You got your one thing. I got my one thing. I think, multi-tools. It's almost like a cheat, isn't it? Because it's too many in one. Swiss Army knife was a sort of cheating way of bringing everything together you almost need, especially that getting the stones out of horses' hooves, which no one has ever used in the last 100 years. There you are.
Yeah. Well, I remember on my combat survival course, there was one guy that had a Leatherman, and it was the most valuable tool. You know, when you watch The Guides Must Be Crazy and there's that glass bottle, and
Yes,
the whole
yes.
tribe wants it.
Yeah.
That's what
That
the
was
Leatherman was
the
like.
Leatherman.
That's why I always have one on me all the time.
You've got your podcast now. You're doing a lot of digital storytelling. You're doing a lot of content creation. Does that then take you away from the idea that there is another big expedition in the pipeline, or is that something that is now on the radar for the next 18 months to 2 years?
I think I'm going to go shorter expeditions, and I do also want to. I've been so busy with this stuff, I haven't been able to pursue a lot of the issues that I want to pursue around the place. It's not just to do with the outdoors. Like there's stuff with AI that we really need to sort out. There's stuff with national park stuff. There's social issues. There's a bunch of things, and so I'm able to take what I've learned in the storytelling and that stuff into other areas now. So I'm going to be branching out and be a lot more opinionated. Not opinionated, just give people information so they can create their own opinions. So
you've done that very well. You've done that very well through your Insta reels and your stories. The whole thing about, the ghosting of national parks for campgrounds and stuff like that. That was something that we were subject to when we went and took a group down to Threadbow. Going there and being empty campgrounds that looked like they were fully booked on websites. You just got to be able to be a contradictory view of what everyone else is thinking and offer your own opinion. And you're doing that supremely well.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people with that opinion. I guess the part of the skill now is just knowing how to craft that so it will go well. And so,
yes.
Like after jagging it a few times, like jagging the way that one came across, I've applied those lessons to other things. So, but at the heart of it, the argument needs to be sound.
Yeah.
Like that's what it's based on. It's the soundness of the argument. And there's a few tricks to how you start the video off, and also the emotional state that you're in. If you're in a very calm, considered, almost apologetic way of delivering it, that gets far more reach than if you're cranky with your eyebrows like this and you're like this. People don't want that. They get that all the time. They want someone who's considered and polite. That gets more views.
Doesn't it just? Yeah, I agree. I think it's an interesting that there is towing the line, which is done almost far too much by people involved in the social space these days, especially if they're representing product, if they've got sponsors, if they've got people on board. They've really got to toe the line. They're not their own authentic self. I think that's what you're navigating really well in that space. We are, I'm afraid, my friend Outback Mike, we are coming almost to the end of our time slot on this one. It's been really interesting. I've loved diving into the journey. I've loved seeing the similarity between your headspace and mine. I know that yours are a lot more raw, but it's motivated me a lot more to think about how can I get out there and do it. The insights have been great. I love the survival skill stuff. I love the escapism that your YouTube channel offers. If people want to follow you, if people want to see the journey, what are the best portals and platforms?
Instagram or Facebook or TikTok at the moment, just Outback Mike for everything. YouTube, I've pretty much only done one video in a year because I've been so busy, but I will go full-time YouTube from mid next year. So follow there as well. And I'll be putting a lot of effort into that. And I'm going to put out probably 20 to 30 episodes of the Great Barrier Reef kind of day by day.
I got lost in the build up and the preamble to this show. I got lost looking through some of the old stuff on the Great Barrier Reef. So I'll be sitting down with Atlas and we're getting the projector out and we'll be looking through some of the videos. So thank you for putting the content together. It is an amazing community of people at Wild Earth that get inspired by this sort of conversation. So for anybody out there, if you love the chat, hit follow and share it with someone who needs a little odd adventure in their life. If you're looking for gearing your fuel or your next great idea, whether that is going along the Great Barrier Reef on your own hand-hewn vessel or it's simply with a camping trip with the kids, check out wildearth.com.au.